The Hamburg Sustainability Conference is starting now. Please welcome to the stage the first mayor of the free and Hanseatic city of Hamburg, Peter Tschentscher.
Sehr geehrte Frau
Minister, Director Steiner, Honorary Citizen Otto, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hamburg Sustainability Conference 2025. This year, more than 100 countries are represented at the conference, with government representatives, ambassadors, and other members of the diplomatic and consular corps. I also welcome the numerous representatives from business, from science, civil society, and international organizations. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamburg is home to people from more than 180 nations. It is an honor for our city that the international community, for the second time now, should be gathering here in our city to discuss strategies and projects for a sustainable, better future for all of us. In recent years, the world has changed. Crises, wars, and conflicts increasingly overshadow the focus on climate change and the global pressures on nature and the environment. The United Nations 2030 agenda provides guidance in these challenging times, which is full of conflicts. The 17 Sustainable Development Goals aim to give 8 billion people worldwide a good life and a secure future, with access to education, to health, participation, peace, security, and prosperity. Implementing this is a mandate and a great responsibility for the international community of states, because global development can only be achieved through cooperation and joint efforts. The Hamburg Sustainability Conference offers an independent forum for discussion, for exchange of experiences, for presentation of new concepts and initiatives, and the agreement on multilateral alliances and partnerships. This year, the program of the HSC focuses on three key issues. First, the reform of the international financial architecture, new investments in the implementation of the sustainability goals, and transformation processes in key sectors such as mobility, logistics, health, biodiversity, and digitalization. Ladies and gentlemen, more than half of the world's population live in urban areas. They consume 80% of global energy. They are responsible for 70% of greenhouse gas emissions, and they produce more than half of the waste. But they're also centers of societal and technological progress. They combine economic strength, scientific excellence, and innovation. Therefore, global metropolises have a special responsibility to bear and also the potential to take a pioneering role in developing and implementing solutions for a sustainable future worldwide. Hamburg is ready for this, and Hamburg has already committed back in 2017 to the consistent implementation of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. The major cities of your countries as well have this potential to act together with politics, with business, science, and the civil society, and to cooperate internationally. The Hamburg Sustainability Conference is a forum for this cooperation. I'd like to thank the co-initiators of the conference for their commitment: the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and the Michael Otto Environmental Foundation. And I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this conference. I wish you interesting discussions, many new impulses and contacts, and of course a pleasant stay here in Hamburg. Thank you very much.
Honourable Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development, Ms. Reem Alabali-Radovan, First Mayor of the free and Hansestadt city of Hamburg, Peter Tschentscher, Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends and perhaps first-comers to the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, and a particularly warm welcome to my colleagues from the United Nations that are very actively represented amongst us here this morning. This is the second edition, and let's be honest, from Hamburg 1 to Hamburg 2 in terms of an HSC, the world has not exactly moved forward. In fact, it is facing more pressures, more conflicts, more disruption, and also less confidence. A growing sense of uncertainty and fear is seeping into not only the international relationships that we have often tried to build over 8 decades, including the architecture for international cooperation, they're also seeping into our societies. The notion that the enemy is my neighbor, that the future is uncertain, that we must turn inwards, is something that is gaining foothold in many of our political discourses. The Hamburg Sustainability Conference, born out of an initiative led by the German ministry BMZ, but also by Michael Otto and the city of Hamburg, was an invitation to which we in UNDP and really on behalf of our UN family did not hesitate for a moment, because this is not only a talk shop, this is a place where we remind ourselves not only of the Sustainable Development Goals and many of the other things that we have agreed we would do together, but we also take up the challenge that the rougher the going gets, the more the tough get going. This is no time for faint-heartedness when it comes to advocating for international cooperation. It is not the most popular thing sometimes to be on television or in a political rally and argue that we need one another. And yet Hamburg, and I hope, Peter Tschentscher, that Hamburg and the Hamburg Sustainability Conference will become a brand that speaks unapologetically to a place where we not only recognize the need to work with one another, but that we also act on that conviction. Last year's conference has been a remarkable first premiere. Many of us left positively surprised, energized since then, and to those who think that multilateralism is dying, let me just say, green shipping was a key topic here last year. A few weeks ago, for the first time after decades, under the auspices of the International Maritime Organization, the world's nations agreed to a CO2 pricing framework and agreement for shipping. Just a few weeks later, in the WHO, which, yes, sadly, the United States is leaving, the world agreed on a pandemic agreement. We are able of acting together, but we have to begin to also defend the ability and the platforms to act together. In the Setting the Scene paper for the Hamburg Sustainability Conference, we try to lay out a few of the great trends and developments that are going to set the context for thinking about sustainability together. And let us also acknowledge that in a world riven by more and more tensions, it is sometimes remarkable that sustainability is one of the few topics on which we can sit around the table and immediately agree that we share a great deal in common and we have a lot of shared interests. But the crosswinds are tough. As the paper points out, we are facing a global economic outlook that is deeply disrupted, increasingly also caught in the geopolitical realities of our time. And if you look at how this will play out, I think one thing is very clear. On the current course that we're on, there will be no winners, including the constraints it puts on the transitions towards a more sustainable future. But let us also acknowledge that in the way that we see trade being instrumentalized and becoming a platform on which conflicts are played out, another trend has emerged, and it is one that we can no longer ignore, nor should we, because the public also needs to hear about this. It is that despite the global economic challenges, green investments are actually delivering transformative impacts, not only in the energy sector, where the energy revolution has begun. 2/3 of all new electricity generating infrastructure built last year around the world was clean, renewable energy infrastructure. Unbelievable if you think back just 10 years ago. And we have seen nations from Latin America and Uruguay, today over 90% of their electricity being generated with renewables. To the African continent, a country like Kenya, over 90%. To China and India, the largest investors in the world in clean energy infrastructure. Let us open our eyes for a moment and recognize that we have a lot more in common and that we're actually acting more in unison than politics sometimes suggests or geopolitics leads us to believe. Here in Hamburg, we need to find ways to consolidate that, to protect that space for international cooperation, for investing in one another. And that brings me to another area that is going to be a key theme here in Hamburg. Artificial intelligence, the digital universe as it is evolving. A remarkable new horizon for development in general for humanity. It's not dystopia, it's not utopia by definition, it is what we, including in fora such here as in Hamburg, choose it to be. That was the title of this year's UNDP Human Development Report. It is a matter of choice. AI and sustainable development is not a techno-determinist declaration of what happens next. It should be led by demand. It should be led also by the kinds of principles we have captured in the declaration on AI that will be adopted here in Hamburg. And let me end by just saying, as we meet here in Hamburg, a city, as you can also see from some of the paintings and the Chamber of Commerce next door, has been a city that for centuries has thrived on understanding that we can succeed together through global trade, the economic relations. But it is also perhaps a moment where, and Minister, this will be one of your great challenges at this moment, that if you are a country of the global south, if you are a least developed country that right now has to raid its health and education budgets just to service the interest payments on your debt, it looks pretty gloomy right now. Aid is declining. The bond markets are no longer accessible to you, and now we are closing the barriers, or rather the doors to trade, and lifting barriers to a level where countries that for years have been encouraged to believe and invest in a global trading system are simply being told, sorry, doors are closed. This is not a good moment to encourage people to believe in the scope, value, and potential of international cooperation. My hope is that here out of Hamburg, out of this Hamburg Sustainability Conference, emerges a new way to actually think about the future, and not only to think, but to act on it. In that spirit, we are proud as UNDP to be partner to this platform, but above all, we are proud to join all of you in hopefully sending signals from here that take us into the future rather than backwards. Thank you.
Please welcome the Federal Minister for Economic Cooperation and Development of the Federal Republic of Germany, Reem Alabali-Radovan.
First Mayor Peter Tschentscher, Achim Steiner, Michael Ottolo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Hamburg is very often described as the gateway to the world, as being open to the world. So when we think of Hamburg, we think of the port, one of the largest ports of Europe, which we can see right behind me. And when we think of Hamburg, we think of those huge container ships that transport goods from Germany and into the wide world, but also to Germany. So the port stands for our globalized world and for the global interconnectedness that also brings about so much progress and advantages for people worldwide. And those people who are open to the world are meeting today and tomorrow here in Hamburg. Those who know that we can only master global challenges together because we depend on each other because wars, pandemics, and the climate crisis do not stop at borders. And it is a special honor to me, on behalf of the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation, the City of Hamburg, the Michael Otto Foundation, and the Development Program of the United Nations, UNDP, to be able to welcome you for the second Hamburg Sustainability Conference. It is such a great sight. This morning, roughly 1,600 experts from politics, from business, from science, and civil society have traveled here, and they have come from more than 110 countries from the north, the south, the west, and the east. They have come for a conference where we do not speak about each other, but with each other. A conference which is about a trustful dialogue and cooperation as partners. A conference that was shaped, and its program as well, across country borders, and this with one clear joint mission, that is not to slow down in our efforts towards implementing the SDGs that have been agreed upon by all nations. On the occasion of the first HSC in October 2024, it was very clear. The international problems are getting bigger and not smaller. Globally, more and more people are forced to leave their home countries because the consequences of climate change can be increasingly felt, especially by the poorest, because inequalities within societies are becoming fiercer and wars and conflicts are increasing. For more than 3 years, Russia is waging an illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. And ladies and gentlemen, the images from Gaza do not leave anyone untouched. Thousands of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, lost their lives over the past months, and some are still left under the rubble. Children who are suffering from hunger, families that have no access to clean water, to medication, not even to bread. Hospitals without electricity, without bandaging equipment, without hope. So what we can see there is a man-made humanitarian disaster. The terrorist attack of Hamas of the 7th of October was a brutal act that was countering humanity, and protecting one's own population is a legitimate goal, militarily and politically, but all state action must be underpinned by international law. So there should be not a military goal that justifies that children starve, that mothers cannot have their children treated, that entire families are buried alive under ruins. No political action should lead to a situation where humanitarian aid is blocked. The Israeli government has to make access for humanitarian aid possible immediately and in the long run, because this is about saving lives every hour, every day, also for the hostages that are still detained by Hamas. They must be released unconditionally and immediately. And for this, we need a ceasefire, because without a ceasefire, there will not be protection for the civilian population, no safe aid, and no perspective for political solutions. The ongoing violence is not only destroying human lives, but also every prospect for peace. And of course, we need to think about our own responsibility. When access to aid supplies is blocked, humanitarian and international law is disregarded, we need to speak about consequences. And this is what we will do together in the German government. So that is the message that is being sent out today. The violence must stop. People in Gaza need help, and not any time, but now. And international law needs to uphold, as well as our joint humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges are enormous, and that was one example that is moving us all right now. And this is why we should not falter and try to create a more equitable and just world. But the rule-based international order is currently underpinned. Traditional forums are very often blocked, and this holds true even more than in October of last year when the first HSC took place. So rarely before have development policy makers been under pressure, just as international cooperation, globally as well as in Germany. Nationalist tendencies of decisive partners, especially the withdrawal of the United States, are hitting development policy with full force, and this has life-threatening consequences for numerous people worldwide. This is why it is all the more important to have a format like the Hamburg Sustainability Conference right now, something that is countering these attacks and is also strengthening a simple insight. We all fare better when we work with each other rather than against each other. And this is what we are providing the framework for, with a conference that is taking account of geopolitical tensions and the loss of trust in the multilateral system. So what matters most for this HSC? Firstly, this time, we are attaching even more importance to an exchange in a safe space, on a high level, in a confidential setting, because only here we can freely sound out what compromises might be and what the pain points might be. And also because it might be easier to understand and acknowledge each other's perspective when discussions do not take place in the public eye. So, in such a safe and protected setting, for example, I will participate today in a discussion about the question how a viable global economic order could look like. One that is cooperative and that also offers opportunities to those countries that so far could not benefit, that have to overcome poverty and inequality. And it is highlighted how important this debate is by the current turbulences in disruptions in trade relations. They hit all countries, but they hit the poorest countries most. So, secondly, there is a strong message that is sent out by this Hamburg Sustainability Conference for strengthening multilateral systems. From the Alliance for the Support of the UN Development System, a coalition of states, upon the initiative of the Federal Ministry for Development Cooperation, these states created this alliance on the occasion of the Munich Security Conference in February, and this is also supporting the UNDP reform process, which has been initiated by the UN Secretary General with a clear commitment: the UN pillar for sustainable development must remain on an equal footing with the other UN pillars. And I am convinced that the United Nations can only be effective if the countries of the global south play an even stronger role in it in the future. And it's not only the UN that matters, but it is about an inclusive world order and relations in partnership with the countries of the global south. And in order to do this, we will create a North-South Commission as the German government. Thirdly, the HSC is a place where new, sometimes unconventional alliances are nurtured, alliances of those that that are willing to take the lead on the path towards sustainability and sustainable development. For example, with the Hamburg Declaration on Responsible AI for the SDGs that will be adopted at the HSC. What is special is that not only states but also civil society, science, the private sector, and international organizations have agreed on sustainability principles for artificial intelligence, because only together we can make sure that AI is something that is useful to our planet and to the people living on it, especially to those in the global south. Then we have another example, which is the Pathfinders Global Alliance Against Inequality, which is going to be established tomorrow at the HSC. Its members want to together make sure that inequalities are reduced in multilateral organizations and forums. For example, at the Financing for Development Conference FFD4 in Sevilla next month, or at the World Social Summit in Qatar. What is so special about this alliance is that it is accompanied by scientists and researchers, and it is also analyzed which conditions must be fulfilled so that solutions can work. It might also have to do with the question who should be involved at what point in time in processes of change. The HSC also stands for alliances that ensure that necessary investments are secured so that the SDGs and the climate and biodiversity goals can be reached. Like with the last HSC initiated Hamburg Sustainability Platform. The goal? More investment to be mobilized so that private and public funds can be bundled and pooled more efficiently and faster. Since the last HSC, the cooperating partners have worked on the creation of a company which will start its work on the first financial product towards the end of this year. There is a major potential because in the course of the next years, this should generate several billion US dollars in additional sustainable investment. And there is also an alliance for investment for sustainable development in municipalities. My ministry and the World Bank are joining up forces with UN Habitat as well as further countries and multilateral development banks. Together, they want to work on good framework conditions for investments in cities. Part of this would be that cities become more creditworthy or that municipalities acquire more financial expertise. Why is this so important? In 20 years, 70% of humans will live in cities. Therefore, cities have to become more resilient towards extreme weather conditions, without losing sight of the interest of the poorest, because it is those poorest people who very often settle in the most at risk and vulnerable places. So it's very impressive how diverse the topics are that we are going to work on today and tomorrow on the occasion of the second Hamburg Sustainability Conference. And I would like to thank everyone who has supported the HSC with this major commitment. A big applause to the organization team of the HSC. So what will be decisive in this? And also in the inauguration of the conference was what you did, Achim Steiner. Your activities with the UNDP are going to come to an end in the near future, and this will leave us with a very big gap. You will be much missed because you are a strong German voice with the United Nations, and you are also the epitome of an international personality, as we just experienced. So the way you did politics matters even more today. So I would like to thank you with all my heart. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my goal when we think of Hamburg, we should think of the message that is sent out by the HSC this morning. International cooperation works. International cooperation creates win-win situations. So I'm looking forward to this conference, and I would like to wish us all a fruitful exchange. Thank you very much.